Hey, it's Nono, and this is the Getting Simple podcast.
Welcome to the Getting Simple podcast.
Why we do the things we do, how do we do them, obsessing about the technological tools we use, how we use them, how much do we work, what do we do with our free time, do we disconnect from work ever, do we spend enough time with our loved ones, why you do what you do.
Hello, and welcome to the Getting Simple podcast. This is your host, Nono Martínez. I'm not Nono Martínez Alonso. Let me start again. This is your host, José Luis García del Castillo. And we have a very special episode tonight. I am here in front of Nono Martínez Alonso, and he's going to be our special guest for tonight. Hi, Nono.
How's it going?
Ooh, how does it feel to be on the other side?
I'm on the spot.
You
It's a bit weird.
Now you know what you've been doing to all these poor people. So we thought it would be quite interesting that after so much time and so many episodes where Nono has been inviting all these really amazing guests to actually have some insights about him firsthand, about what he thinks about simplicity, and a little bit about his own life. What do you think?
It sounds good. Let's see.
All right.
I'm not ready for this.
I don't think I'm ready either. But he was kind enough to invite me to command this episode. I want to let our audience know that there have been no agreed upon questions, or there's no script. So Nono doesn't really know what I'm going to ask him. And I'm going to try to be a little evil and a little teasing to see if we uncover a bit more of the truth behind this really special character. If you allow me to, I would like to structure this episode in 3 parts. All right. I'm going to first ask you a little bit about yourself and about how you got to be in what you are today. Then I'm going to move on to some questions that I have about the podcast itself. So it's going to be a little meta, right? And then we're going to end up with a bunch of random, unconnected questions, the way you do with other guests in this show. How does that sound?
Sounds awesome.
All right, let's go for it. I'm going to start super simple. I want you to tell us your story. And let me frame it this way, because you've disclosed a lot of bits and pieces about your story and things from your life and views that you have upon how things go in the world. But I don't think you've done a cohesive one-segment story about it. So I think the audience will be really interested in knowing a little bit about yourself. And I will frame it perhaps as, can you tell us what defines you today and how did you get there?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm on the spot today. So I've done this to many people. I mean, maybe 20 people, 30 people already. It's the first time that it's about me. And I have to say it's not easy, but I'll try my best. I think there are many things that surround me, right? And you've asked me how I got to today, but I will start by saying I kind of see that where I'm at now or today, right, in 2019, is that I've in some way tried to explore a lot of different things and formalize or purposefully chose to focus on the ones that I think are the most representative in my life, or at least the ones that I think that if I keep developing throughout my life, that'll make me happiest, right? So to start going back a bit in time, I'll start with how I really started with what I do today. I root who I am today to my early days. So I had the lack through my family to get technology and devices, so access to technology from really early years of my life, and also in some way, I don't know why, but get motivated to draw, like to do sketches and to do, well, not sketches how I understand them today, but to sketch in school and to actually feel that what I was doing was something that other people was seeing that was taking a bit more care of than other of my classmates, right? And that's just the silly thing of winning the Christmas postcard drawing in the class, right? Which is nothing really, but it just, I don't know, I just like doing that, right? Other people would be highlighted in the class by writing the best or doing some other exercises, but that was one of the things that I was into.
This was before architecture school, right?
Oh, this was when I was 8 years old or 6 or 10. I don't know. I still have those podcasts. I guess I can share them, which is probably useless, but you'll see how much I've evolved. So, and then going back to technology, right? Throughout the times where there was a time in Spain where all the pharmaceutical companies would be able to give doctors a lot of stuff just because they were selling their medicines, right? And I had the chance to use a lot of small gadgets that they will give my dad just because that was a normal thing. You would give a BlackBerry or a laptop or like even a PDA, right? Like the kind of the precursor of the stylus and the first styluses and all that stuff. And I found myself, I think when I was 11 years old, I don't quite remember, or 10 years old, I found myself spending a lot of time with the computer. It's something that wouldn't seem normal for a kid my age, and wasn't normal for anyone there because nobody really had computers in their daily work and in their daily life, but something that to my surprise is super common today. And I remember my parents telling me that I was spending too much time on the computer, and it seemed like I was doing something wrong, right? And now we're all doing that, and it still seems like it's wrong, but it's our job, right? We have to be using the computer.
So I think back in those times, computers were a thing that a lot of kids use for intense video gaming. How did it turn for you as a creative tool? How did that happen?
That was something I was going to segue into. I don't know when it happened, but of course I would play like Age of Empires or Counter-Strike or Warcraft or any games that were around in the epoch. But what I do remember is that at some point I started, I used to buy video game magazines, but I also started buying computer magazines, which for some reason, and I don't really know why, and they would bring like the latest releases of devices, microphones, or prices of new chips and things. And I wasn't necessarily interested on that, but what really caught my attention was that they would come with a trial version of a lot of high-end, like state-of-the-art programs, right? And some of them would be, I think one of them that changed maybe who I am today is PaintShop Pro, which was the basically the competition of Photoshop, and I think Photoshop catched on, and PaintShop Pro I think disappeared. I don't really know if they're still in the market, but I started to do collages or try to explore all the effects that you could do, so to make my own kind of backgrounds for the computer and things like that. So I would spend hours doing those things.
So like the Instagram of the 90s.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. We also had one of the first, for us, was one of the first digital portable cameras. You would be able to, I think when you have a compact card, and you would be able to take 11 photos, and then you have to empty the card to the computer and start again. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's something that even when I was really young caught my attention. I remember that at school we actually learned coding a bit, so like HTML. And that's something that I was really eager to keep learning. And I mean, that was one thing that I was good at because I was spending time outside of the class testing.
And how did that happen? I don't recall being a common thing among kids in Spain.
Yeah, so I had a class which was basically an hour per week to spend on the computer, and there would be some games. So some people, we would be allowed to play games in that moment. I remember discovering Google there. Like the teacher told us there's this new search engine called Google, and it's becoming really famous. It's really good, and also getting introduced to that. Even using a game that was like, I think there was a soccer game or some other shooting game that was aimed at learning how to type with the computer. So I cannot learn how to type without looking to the keyboard, which is something that we all know now, or most people know that I work with. I don't want to say that everyone knows how to do that. So, and I don't know, for some reason, one of the teachers decided that we were going to learn that. I might have been there maybe a bit older, like maybe 14 or 13 or 12, I don't know. But the thing is that I had my first website when I was maybe 13. I don't remember. Like, I don't remember the exact dates, but I know that I started doing HTML, doing some programming, starting to get into animated GIFs with my name to put on the website, like a web counter and things like that. And seeing that people would like that and go into, because what I did actually, this was probably the early on Instagram. I actually made a flash album with pictures of people from my class, and people would go there because they would be on the picture. So people would go into there and then they would see themselves. Also pictures of myself with doing motorcycles outside with my with my dad. That was something that I also did when I was young. I've done a lot of activities throughout my life. Like I've tried swimming, I've tried karate, golf, or surfing, or doing a lot of stuff. But what really stuck with me during all those years when I was a teenager was using computers. I started getting a bit more serious with websites when I was maybe 13, 14 or something. And that got me into keeping doing it, and also into 3D modeling. Then a few years after that, when I was 18 years old, I started studying architecture. That was the thing that was for me. I really liked it. I was doing good sketching. I was learning a lot of drawing. I was with computers, so everything I would do on the computer, like AutoCAD or 3ds Max or rendering, everything seemed like I enjoyed it. And I actually really liked the aesthetics of architecture, of like crafting something to be like super polished and stuff. And I think at the beginning, one thing to note is that I had a bit of an advantage because of having knowledge on how to use computers, because everything was done on the computer at that time. But then it was that the third year that I studied architecture, right? This was in my hometown in Malaga, that I said, I cannot do this anymore like this. We were spending 24 hours, 7 days a week in architecture school. And I guess a lot of people have mentioned this on the podcast, right? But my own experience was I'm giving my full time to this because I've enjoyed it. But after 6 different studios, and studios just basically like an architecture studio where you have to design buildings and do projects based on a brief that the teacher gives you. And I think it was too much. I was doing well, but I was a bit burnt out. And actually that was when I started looking into exchange programs to see where I could go. A lot of people in my school were going to Europe, were going to other cities from Spain, and some of them were internationally going to the US. I had the chance to access to going to North Carolina, so North Carolina State University in Raleigh. So that was my first real touch with the US, even though I had been there as a teenager for 3 weeks in Indiana, Pennsylvania before. And I continued to study architecture in my 4th year in North Carolina, but I had a lot more time for myself and to do my own side projects and to hang out with other people. One thing that I forgot to note is that how my programming continued during architecture is that I continued learning on my own, and even started doing an iPhone application, like a simple structure application for the iPhone, right? And it wasn't until I was in this exchange program that I actually had time to sit and develop it properly, because in Spain, I couldn't do that, right? And after North Carolina, I decided that I had liked it so much that I went to Sydney. So I did my 5th year in Sydney, did a lot of networking there. So I kind of joined, I don't know, I didn't really join the scene of programming there, but I tried to go to some meetups to meet people who were doing user experience design or interaction, or startups to create their own web platforms or iPhone apps. And that was good. So I saw that there was some other realm of people that were interested in different things, but also enjoyed design and creating their own products.
How did you end up in Boston then?
I returned to Spain because I have to finish my final thesis project in architecture in October 2013. I had to finish this, so I tried to finish it as soon as possible. I spent 6 to 8 months or something doing this final project that for so many people seemed to be the most important project of their life. I myself realized that that wasn't the case for me. I would do one project the best I could and would submit it, and then I will go somewhere else. And during the process of doing this project, I applied to study a master's degree in design technology at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. I actually learned about this program because of Ana Pujol, that she was doing the program at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just took this as an opportunity to prepare my first architecture portfolio for like architecture studios or any other design studios. And I did the portfolio, I sent it through, and in March I got accepted. So I got accepted to study the master's degree. And
that was the month before we met for the first time in upstate New York, right?
I think so, yeah.
Huh.
And yeah, it might be that.
No.
Actually, that was 2 years before.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2 years before. So Jose Luis and I actually met at a conference in Troy, New York, the weirdest place in Rensselaer
Smart Geometry
University.
2012 in the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
So I got accepted for this master's degree. And then I realized I didn't have funding. I didn't have money to pay. And I started applying for some scholarships, right? On the meanwhile, I also applied for a scholarship that will maybe take me to study in Europe, to one of the quote-unquote Starchitect studios. That was also an attractive thing a lot of people do in Spain, that is like, we can place you in some of these studios and maybe you can stay there for a long time. And I happened to get accepted as a Fulbright scholar. I got the Fulbright scholarship and I got accepted to go to Foster and Partners on the same year. But the problem is that the Fulbright scholarship wouldn't allow me to go study until the year afterwards. Long story short, I kind of had to defer the time to come to study in Cambridge, and I went to London. So I spent almost a year working in London, and then I came to Cambridge in 2015 in August. Since then until the last September, I spent living here, 1 minute walk from Jose Luis. And I did a master's in design technology and had the chance to meet people from Autodesk, get to do an internship there, and join as a full-time employee. Started as a software engineer, and at the time that we're recording this podcast, I'm turning into an artificial intelligence and machine learning engineer. So I don't really know what that means yet.
When you figure out, you should tell me as well. So currently you are still an employee of Autodesk, right? You belong to the generative design group in Boston, but you work remotely. You work from Spain, right? How has going back to Spain been for you?
As I've mentioned before, I have spent around 7 years living abroad, and I haven't really missed one Christmas from going back home, right? I've tried to fly back as much as possible, and even when I was in Australia, I flew back 3 times. Also, since I was living in London, I'm with my girlfriend. There were many reasons for me to go back. I also have family, right? My grandma's old, and I really enjoy going back. Due to some reasons, I had to go back. For some people, it seemed like it was annoying. Like, you have to go back. When are you going to come back to the US and stuff? And I actually took it as an opportunity. I enjoyed that possibility, right? Like, I saw it as an opportunity, not as something bad. You have to leave the US. As something good that I actually have been thinking for a while. Like, actually working for a team, but working remotely, and see how that works for me. What I can say is that so far it's working really well.
Why would you say it's working so well? What makes the cut?
One thing that made it easy before why it's working well is that I had been working with my team for more than a year when I left. And we already have a crafted process. We knew each other. We knew why we had to meet, when we had to meet, and how to allocate tasks so everyone on the team can do their own thing and then put it in common. So for me, it was really easy. From the first day when I went back, I could open my laptop and start doing my thing. And I didn't really have to learn new process or anything.
So what's been added?
What's been added, or maybe what's been removed better, is that when I lived here in Cambridge, and I've written about this, I had a 1 hour commute each way almost. I mean, maybe 35 minutes to 50 is more accurate. The office is always really good to catch up and to be on the same page with everyone, but there's also a lot of room for chit-chatting, or like going to eat and then staying more time than you need to, or having more meetings that you feel you need to. So the first thing that I noticed was that I would spend the full morning for myself, and I would be able to focus, even decide the day before what I was going to spend my time with.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never really been able to do that at the office, of spending 3 hours straight coding. Sometimes you wake up really, really early, and if you wake up at 7, you start working maybe at 7:30 or 8. And then around 12, you feel you've done the work that you need to do for the day. You then might have some meetings or do some other stuff, but it's really easy. I think it works for me, but it's also something that you need to be able to craft your schedule and organize yourself.
This links really well with a question that I wanted to ask you. What distracts Nono Martínez Alonso? What's on your way to a lean mental life?
So this brings to my mind the main reason why I do this project. The current slogan I have is to simplify your life and do less stuff better. And I'm my own enemy in that because I have a full-time job and I also try to do this podcast and to write, and I try to sketch, and I try to collaborate with other people in projects. There's not really that much that distracts me. I read about this and I try to craft my own process. And of course, there is like email, there is like social media, there is meetings and maybe unnecessary things that you agree that you would do. But what really seems that distracts me is the fact that I have to switch my brain sometimes. Like I have to change from full-time job at Autodesk, and then you finish, and then you might other day you might want to spend a bit of time focus writing, or editing podcasts is really time consuming. And I would leave sketching aside because that's one thing that I really consider a hobby. Like I decided that wasn't gonna be, I sell some prints, but I'm not gonna be a full-time art seller. I enjoy it. I think people who like what I do appreciate it, as some people even do commissions and stuff. But that's not something I'm gonna live from ever. So yeah, I think that's the thing. Like I don't know if I would get bored if I was doing just one single thing, but I think I'm my own enemy when it comes to getting distracted.
That also relates to another question that I wanted to ask you, because it's a constant in your story that you feel like you want to do a lot of things, you want to try a lot of things and experiment different ideas, different creative avenues. Do you think that's a healthy way of doing things? I say this perhaps as opposed to like the other philosophy, which could be, oh, let's try to find out what I'm good at, and then let's like really, really hone on that, you know? What is the difference for you between trying many different things to build yourself as a person, as opposed to really focusing on the ones that you think you're good at, or that you're really, quote unquote, monetizing in your life?
I guess you say monetizing, not in monetary terms.
Yeah, not in monetary terms, but the ones you get returns from, tangible returns from.
Tangible returns is a really ambiguous thing, I would say. And I'm not telling you to explain what you mean by it. It's just that that's what I think I'm doing. And, you know, it might not seem like that, but I've done a lot of other things. And I do this review process from time to time where I say, what are my main activities and what am I engaging with? And why do I do them? Like, what's the reason that I'm doing this podcast, or what's the reason why I sketch, and what's my mission, and what's the reason to do it? What's the purpose, right?
Wouldn't your life be simpler if you did less, but better?
Yeah, it would. Maybe it would also be boring.
Oh, okay. That's an interesting.
I advocate for doing less but better, but I think there is a medium point where if you don't feel some time in your life that you're a bit stressed, or that something gives you a bit of adrenaline because you need to almost close your eyes before you do it and then jump to do it, I think it's not worth it. I mean, I love giving talks and I get that feeling every time. You get a bit stressed, you gotta prepare, but then it's super rewarding, and I feel that I'm doing something because, you know, people are listening to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. And what bores you?
Doing something for a long time without seeing any change.
You ask other people in this podcast, what is success for you? And what does it look like? And who do you think is a successful person?
The first person that came to mind is Seth Godin. I see this guy, or this man. I follow Seth Godin. I've been following him for a while. I think ever since 2012, 2013. And the only reason why I say that is because he has a lot of confidence on what he has achieved, and he's comfortable in his position. He takes risks, but it seems like his goals are met consistently. All right. And he's written around, I don't know, maybe 25 books. to clarify his own ideas and formalize them, and also to share them with other people. And he now talks really confidently about what he has crafted, right, in the process.
Well, I see you as a successful person. Very early, you were tapping into technologies. You've achieved a lot in your life. You went to school, you got an architecture degree, you did a master's at a very high level university, you work for a high profile company, and you do sketching, you do all this amazing work with the podcast. Are you conscious about that? Are you confident about how successful you are?
Well, I personally don't see it that way. Sometimes I look back and I say, fuck, can I say that on the podcast? And I say, like, look, like, you've done all this stuff already, and a lot of people are not going to be able to do it ever. And I actually have that present.
You mean because of scarcity, economic means,
disease, scarcity, family situation, where
social,
they have been
political,
born, anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people, and I'm doing some other projects for this Getting Simple thing to raise a bit of awareness of how we give for granted daily the silly things. People on this podcast have repeated over and over that success is something that you measure personally. I do consider myself successful, but I'm always trying to improve certain things. And I mean, one of the things is that, and I will put the example of this podcast, right, that you can always compare. Miss Minimalist, there is this writer that also writes about, she has a book called The Joy of Less. I always remember her quote that is, if you look at your neighbor and, I don't know, he has a Ferrari and you want the Ferrari, you have to compare yourself to the people who are up the ladder and also down the ladder. I think social media today is creating a never-ending wheel to have more followers, more reactions, more comments, and also, I think, even more importantly, to generate more output than that you can by yourself.
And an anxiety coming with that.
Yeah. And I would say one thing that I say to a lot of people in 10 years, if you were to ask me, I don't know if you have it on there on your questions, but if you were to ask me, what would you regret not doing 10 years from now? It would be, I wouldn't say outsource, but collaborate and connect with people who also want to promote the same things I want to promote and work with them.
What would you tell the audience that listens to your podcast and looks up to you? Because they may think, oh, well, he had all these computers when he was 8 years old and he was coding when he was 11, whatever. Like, I didn't do that when I was a kid, so I'm already late to this game. What would you tell them?
I tell people that even though I won the postcard competition in my class when I was 8 or 6 or something, I had to sketch and draw a lot over the last 10 years to be able to sketch like I do today. Like, even if let's say I had some talent or advantage for sketching when I was born, maybe other people had it as well. And I'm not saying that, you just have to be lucky or something. You need to work hard. You need to work your way to whatever you want to get. Atomic Habits is a really good book about this, and Mindset is a really good book about this, and some other books that I'll name on the episode notes. Coding is a good example. You need to spend hours and hours before your brain actually understands what you're doing. Sketching is one of the best examples, that you need to sketch every month, every week, or every day if you can. And just to give you a different example, not something that I consider that I would do well when I was younger. Before studying architecture, my worst grades were in philosophy and literature. And I always have this complex of like, I don't know how to write. I don't know what the other people in the class are doing that are getting really good grades, but I cannot do it. And I would study Descartes and Plato and Nietzsche or whatever, and I would get a 5 or a 4. This is like, I don't know if it's a D or whatever that is in...
That's an F.
An F in the US. And it was like right before architecture. And my teacher actually told me that I wasn't working enough. And maybe I wasn't. I don't know. I don't really know. But this was something really important for me, because when I had that, I don't know if mental disadvantage of just thinking about that, I went to Australia and I said, okay, I'm going to open my blog. I'm going to open it in English and I'm going to start just posting, just putting things online. And yeah, I didn't write great stuff, and it's actually still online. If you go to nono.man, go to the archives, there's the first post from 2013 or something that it's called The Launch, and it's there. So I still don't consider today that I write well, but I've read books about how to write, and I've practiced, and I have a lot of drafts, and I try to do it consistently, and I try to research to have some content that people might be interested in and that I learn from. And there you have it. And the only thing I can say is that I write better today than I wrote in 2013. And that's personal success, defined in terms of the growth mindset, the concept that the mindset book mentions. The book Atomic Habits that I just finished reading last week, it's great to understand why anyone can get better at something and how to do it. And an actual action method that you can implement in your life from today after finishing reading it, right? And get better at anything. And understand why the difference between somebody who gets really good at something and somebody who never gets around is that the people who quote unquote succeed in their field manage somehow to keep going through the boredom, through the boring part of this podcast is really hard to edit, it's too long, or writing this draft is taking 10 hours, I'm gonna let it go.
It seems a constant in your discourse as well to talk about the idea of tools and technology that enhance creativity. And that's a lot about the work that you do these days, right? Especially now with your new machine learning, artificial intelligence take. What is the role that tools play in your own creativity?
I will tell you one little anecdote, and is that when I was in architecture school, even though I was acquainted with computers and CAD drawings and all these things, I bought a printer. I bought a really large format printer my first year, and it turned out to be the best purchase I've ever done because I haven't printed more with anything than with that machine. And the role that played was that even though I would do a lot of stuff digitally, I would always print and then go back to the analog medium and sketch over paper with pen and pencil and trace paper, and then scan it back and then do that process over and over. And with this, I want to say that, we try to create tools ourselves. I do this, and you, Jose Luis, do this as well. And I think we just want tools that enhance our process and contribute to what we already are doing. Some of them might add something new that we were not doing before, but at the end of the day, it's just to become so comfortable with the tool that you can do it without thinking, and only for the thing that that is going to make what you're doing better.
There's also a lot of conversation in your podcast and with the people you interview on the idea of creating tools to enhance people's creativity and just to share it out there so that you can turn people more creative or facilitate this process. Why do you think that's important? Why should more people be more creative?
This is a bit of a philosophical question that kind of can escalate to really long levels. I think, to me, being creative gives me joy in some way, even though sometimes what I do has been done by other people already or in the same way. And that's something that struck me a lot when I go to a class at the Media Lab, where I wasn't allowed to do anything that on research had been published already. And I would say, I want to do this myself because I've never done it and I want to learn it. So I think that the process of creating something on your own and then feeling, I wouldn't say useful, but having something that you can say, I've done that and I've given it this touch of originality, and that's why you can see that I've done it or how it's different.
The contribution aspect.
Yeah, so the contribution of something to probably let people see things differently and understand different parts of something that you might be passionate about that they don't know. The part of enabling other people to use your tools is also another level of joy. It's about, I can do this way and I'm enjoying it a lot. I can feel it. So I want you to try it as well and kind of share that feeling with me, because then we can communicate that we both share. So I guess it's about engagement and creating community. And I was thinking before that I hadn't really created any tools myself independently for other people to use. Even some applications that I've done, the interfaces, I've never really seen other people use them. But a good example is my content management system. It's called Folio. Jose Luis knows about this a lot. But I had my sort of first quote unquote client as my mom. I created her website even before mine. And with this content management system, she could post sketches or drawings and texts. And she had the mailing list newsletter automated. You can see how this is a tool that I think the keyword is an enabler. It's something you couldn't do before. Now you can do it. And if you want some custom behavior, we can code it for you and then see how you perform with that one.
For our audience, a content management system is a virtual website that makes creating a website much easier.
You can refer to the W word.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't know if I was going to offend you. Such as WordPress, but Folio is much nicer, I have to say. All right, before we move on into the next section, I'm not going to ask you what would you tell your 20-year-old self, but I'm going to ask you what is in your future, what is waiting there. How do you see Nono in 10 years?
Maybe having an even clearer idea of what are the fewer things I want to focus on. I think my direction over the last couple years, I think the last decade, has been about trying a lot of things and discarding, only leaving on the table the ones I really think that are meaningful.
That's very nice. Thank you very much. So let's move on a little bit. Let's talk about this podcast, the Getting Simple podcast. Sorry. The Getting Simple podcast. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
How does someone wake up one day and think, oh, I need to start this really labor-intensive project that takes me a lot of hours every week and that I have to arrange with all these amazing people to talk to? How did that happen? How did the Getting Simple podcast start?
Just to provide a bit of context, when I interviewed Panagiotis Michalatos, which is both of our thesis advisor, the first thing he told me, he looked at me when I opened my bag and he said, "So now you're turning into a sound engineer?" This is, I don't know, it's a weird hobby to have and many people might know it. It has too many variables that you have to learn and it's a bit crazy. How this actually happened, I believe that because I somehow started singing and recording myself as a hobby.
Oh, is that so?
Yes, and there's nothing really published there, even though I don't mind showing people. I might put a little snippet there to bother people.
Perhaps you should start this episode with a tiny clip. I've actually heard some of those. They're pretty nice.
After creating my blog in 2013, I formalized the project of everything I was trying to write about life crafting and how you understand your workday and things like this as Getting Simple in 2015. And along that year and next, the podcast idea started to come up. And it wasn't until my Australian friend James Maloney, whom I met in North Carolina and then I saw in Sydney.
And who was the first guest of this podcast?
Yeah, so until he visited me in Cambridge, so he stayed there for a few nights, that I thought his story was worth sharing with the Getting Simple audience. I hadn't really planned anything of like, I'm gonna make this podcast real or anything, and this was March 2017, but I told him to tell me his story over microphone, and maybe I would format that for the blog or something. His story was writing a book while he was working full-time at a consultancy on the hours before going to work, so waking up really early, and then quitting his job, publishing this book, and try to become a motivational speaker. I don't know, I think that goes so in line with Getting Simple, not that you have to quit your job to pursue...
Or maybe you do.
Yeah, or maybe you do. There's a good book for that, to know if you have to quit your job or not, that is called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
Oh, I need to read that one myself.
But yeah, so I recorded that interview, and then in December, I decided to do the whole ordeal of making a cover, uploading the podcast, updating Folio to be able to release podcasts with it, and learning how to edit audio in Adobe Audition. So I released the first episode in December 1st. And since then, so far, I've been releasing one long-form interview every month.
That's very nice.
And I would just mention, before we move on to another topic, that the whole purpose of doing this is to not have Getting Simple be a blog where I just write, but a blog that, apart from having some backed up content from books and research, had also the thoughts of other minds, right? Engaging with people, which is enriching for me and for the audience, and also looking for interesting people that are doing things that attract me, like research, art, programming.
Why is simplicity so important for you? And why do you think it should be important for other people? Because don't get me wrong, people's life these days are really complex, and making them simple is actually a very complex task in a way. Why do you think we should spread the word about this?
Well, I think there are many synonyms, and not necessarily simplicity is the most important word. I just at the time thought that that was a good name. I think Getting Simple, and I've mentioned this a few times already, refers to myself getting somewhere, so going towards simplicity. And I always refer to this as people joining the journey. And I think that you need to point somewhere to achieve better things. And you will always stay at the midpoint because you're never going to reach the utopia point or the platonic point.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about the actual making of this podcast? Because, like, what does it look when you are with one of your guests? All the time that it takes you to clean the sound later, edit, how much editing do you do, etc.
At first, it just was about talking to some friend or some colleague at work and letting them know I wanted to record an interview. I would have identified in some way that I could have a conversation that would be worth listening to, at least to the people who are interested in these topics. So it would be about contacting someone. And this is somehow getting a bit different because now I'm also contacting people remotely, even some people that I haven't met in person before. And I think that even adds a new dimension to the project, where some people who don't know me personally accept to talk in the podcast, and how it usually works, except for one remote interview I've done with Adam Menges so far. But I guess I expect I will do more remote interviews.
From Adam Menges from Lobe AI, right?
Yeah. So after somebody accepts the invitation, and I try to tell them, I have a template email. So I send an email, let's say I send the same email to everyone, right? But I always craft that email in a different way because of what topic I've identified that their lives or their careers match the themes I'm trying to expose here. And then I would go to that person's house, or maybe invite them to my house, depending on the situation, and then have the whole ordeal of spending 3 to 5 hours with the person, to spend some time, talk to them through the process of recording a bit beforehand, try to calm them down and say that this is something that we can edit, doesn't need to be published if they're not happy with it, and all that happens. So usually I take really long to set up. So I usually take, I don't know, 30, well, I used to take close to an hour, but I think I now can set up in like 30 minutes. They will get to my house or I will get to theirs, we'll set up the stuff, I will walk them through the process, and then we'll start talking. And I started doing long form podcast format, which inspires a lot in Tim Ferriss's podcast because of how long they are and how much I enjoy some of the interviews. And we would talk usually from 1 hour and a half to 3 hours. And I would rarely do any editing to the content, more than removing some phrases that are redundant or removing long silences or crackings or things like that. I think I was a newbie when I started, so I didn't even know anything about audio editing. So I would amplify background noise instead of removing it. But after maybe 27 interviews edited or so, or maybe 20 something, I'm becoming a lot better. I mean, and this again is one more thing that is just practice. And it has taken me up to 20 hours to edit one episode, maybe 13 hours to 16 to edit the audio, and then preparing the newsletter, crafting all the episode notes and references, and then
Because you do a really comprehensive job with the notes and the description.
I try, and then sharing on social media. And one thing that, talking about artificial intelligence, has played a really good job in my life, or role in my life, is that before I would have to edit the episode, I would send it to the guest for them to listen. And then I would go around Cambridge, around Inman Square. I would listen to it with my iPhone and take notes to see what the topics are and what they're saying and what things I need to correct. And now I'm using this online service that's called Otter AI, where I just dump the file and in like 30 minutes I get a transcript. And I can skim through the text and refer to the audio with that. That has really changed the way I work. The workflow I do is that now I edit the whole episode. I know more or less everything is fine, but then I can go and read the text or skim through it to extract books we've mentioned or movies or other references.
What was the most difficult part of doing these podcasts when you started at the very beginning? And what is the most difficult part of doing them now that you're experienced?
I would be nervous before, which is something that I'm not nowadays. I'm more comfortable with the microphone and with interviewing someone, and I can feel how I'm more comfortable interviewing than the interviewee, because usually people haven't been through many interviews. And preparing the notes for me before would be also an ordeal. I would have to craft all these custom questions for the person and all the process, and I didn't really have that quite done. So it will take me a few hours to prepare each episode.
Do you have like many notes before the episode starts, or do you try to respond to what the interviewee is telling you?
So I try to be prepared in terms of knowing the background of the person and having some prepared questions that can lead to interesting conversations, hopefully related to the podcast or some of the topics that I'm interested in. But I do have prepared notes. I now have a set of what I call research lines or research questions that are just topics that I like to write about and read about. They're actually at gettingsimple.com/interview-topics. I started doing this just for people to start grooming in their minds over the weeks before the podcast. I would send this link to say, there you have some random questions that I might do to you or maybe not. And that's my baseline, that's my template. But then at the beginning, I will try to have some custom questions. I'm starting to be a bit better at letting the person divert a bit and follow up with whatever topic they might be talking about, and not to be so strict about following a guideline and be so restrictive about, okay, now we're going to switch to that. We're not going to talk more about that other thing.
I believe I interrupted you before when you were about to tell us what's difficult about doing this podcast now that you're experienced.
One thing that is not really being difficult of the podcast is that now you have this contract with yourself. You want to release one episode every month, and now you have to find the time. So you have to cram those 10 to 20 to 30 hours to focus on this episode. And it's really hard because I do everything myself right now. And I mean, one thing that's straightforward is that maybe somebody can collaborate with me, or I can, get some help. So that's hard, is actually finding the time. The editing is still hard because we always record in different rooms, different locations. And I would say that it's a bit easier than before because I'm learning more about what you can do or not to edit audio. And I guess one thing that is still super hard is to have a proper setup when you're recording at home, to actually setting the whole thing, to have it prepared. I've read a lot about friction and about how any sort of barrier to get going with something makes you do it a lot less. And this again is in Atomic Habits, is really well written.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I'm working toward, to have one environment where I can sit and play record, and I don't have to put sound absorption panels or the microphone or there's a lot of stuff that goes on into having a good recording environment. And I'm really anal about
it. I know, I can tell. Can you share? I mean, this is almost like asking who's your favorite kid, which you should not tell, but can you?
Well, but nobody is listening really, right?
All right, yeah, okay. So just tell me, between you and I, do you have a favorite episode and a least favorite? Let's reframe this question. What surprises or what nice moments can you recall from, like special moments can you recall from this series?
One special moment is when I asked Andres Colubri about clothing, so the things you wear every day, and he diverted into telling me his morality about cloning humans. That was really fun, but I kind of said to myself, I cannot do this to this guy. I'll just let him talk. And actually, the conversation led to somewhere interesting.
I remember this moment, like a spelling and like a pronunciation kind of a misunderstanding.
And not for the content, but there have been 2 moments or 3 moments where I felt really happy. Where the first one is the second episode after I left the room with Zach Krohn. I basically remember telling him, you just made my podcast a real thing, right? Because he's like, oh, I haven't interviewed another friend of myself. And then after I recorded Ian Keogh's and Ben Fry's episode, because those were, I mean, they're quote unquote big fish in their field. And the fact that they accepted to give me 3 hours of their time is super, super valuable.
I know the answer, but I don't know. Can we share that with the audience? Which other quote unquote fancy people have rejected your invitation to participate in this podcast?
Yeah, go for it. Maybe someday they accept an invitation from me.
No. I mean, can you share that with us?
Yeah. Oh, I share it. You know, right?
I don't know. I know, but can you share?
Well, there have been people who are, there's some people that haven't rejected. They're just postponed. And that's something that I know from heart, that it's just because right now they cannot do it. And that's, that's a bit sad as well. And also from people that are kind of, and I won't name names, there is some visionary, right, a futurist visionary on tech that I am really passionate about. I like his books. And his assistant replied to me really, really nicely, which I was surprised. I said, like, wow, I have got, is this the first assistant? I thought it was going to be the only one, but even some other people who are not really that well known, like I never got to them. I got a message from their assistant. I mean, I guess that's fine. That some people have that dynamic, and it's understandable. Maybe I have the chance in the future. There is also a really nice researcher from MIT that was nice enough to tell me the quote unquote truth, to say that she was writing a book at the time and she was kind of retired from the whole world, which is understandable. And she was kind enough to tell me to keep her in my list for the future. And I actually earned myself an email, one of the big CEOs of cloud computing, or not cloud computing, cloud storage.
Cloud storage.
And I never got an answer, even though I actually talked to him that day.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
That's probably disclosing too much.
Well, their loss. I'm gonna tease you a little bit here and be a little bit controversial or polemic, because talking to other people about the podcast, sometimes I've heard the opinion of like, well, is this podcast really about simplicity, or is it more about like, I don't know, recovering architects or computational creativity design, something like, should he just rename the podcast, or what's going on here?
So the name of the podcast, that's sticking with me. I like it, and I think it works in some way, and maybe one day I'll change it. But I'm not really worried about names. What I'm aware of is of what you mentioned, and I've seen this because I've gone to the architecture, engineering, and construction industry conferences and events, and I get this feeling that some people who are listeners, active listeners, right? There's some people who seem to consistently listen, and I mean, that made me really happy to hear. Some of you, if you're listening, might know who you are. But I get the feeling that they assume that because among the first people, there were a lot of architects that went into computation or into computational design, into programming, basically. The podcast is about that, about BIM, right? Building information modeling, about architecture, about the construction industry. And the most painful proof of that, which is true at the moment, is that Apple Podcasts sets me with suggestions of podcasts to listen. And I don't know if it's because the people who listen to this podcast also listen to those, or just because they also scrape the data and look at hashtags and text that I write and references. But the podcasts next to me on the list are things like Designalize or Beamcat, whatever, or I don't know, all these.
It's not Seth Godin.
It's not. Well, actually, there's like 20,000 hertz, and I think the minimalists were on that list. And so there seem to be topics that they're grappling already that make me more related to the podcasts that I feel have more in common. But I'm still definitely not there. And I think a few interviews that I've not published yet are completely in a different realm of conversation. But just to summarize, I would say that this podcast is intended to reflect about my life and about your life, the life of the listener, why we do the things we do, how do we do them, and obsessing, maybe a bit too much, but obsessing about the technological tools we use, how we use them, what do we do with our free time, how much do we work, do we disconnect from work ever, or do we spend enough time with our loved ones? So all these topics around why you do what you do. And it's not really about process in the architecture industry. What I do take really seriously is that if I have a guest sitting there, I really listen to what they say. I tell them always that the first half of the interview is going to be about you, about your life. So don't stop, because I just want to talk the minimum words for you to keep talking and to tell me about why you are where you are today. What happened is that many of the people I've interviewed so far studied architecture. And that's just because, Autodesk and Harvard Graduate School of Design and things like that. But you can also see that a lot of other interviews are about the life of artists or educators or programmers, designers, and even environmental scientists or economics. And last, I would say that also this is possible for me because there is a long form format. And if I were to ask someone the 15-minute summary of their lives, I would really get a shallow view of who that person is. What 2 hours or 3 hours of conversation lets me do is to go in depth and let them tell me about what they're comfortable about. It's like the job they do every day, and then kind of cut at an hour and a half or something, and then start asking them more personal questions.
Okay. I think we're going to get into that moment very soon here too.
Great.
And just to wrap up this section about the Getting Simple podcast, what do you see in the future of the podcast? Where would you like it to go? What kind of guest would you like to have? What turns do you think it may take? What changes may be awaiting?
Well, when you want to talk or write about something, the first rule is that you have to do some sort of immersion. And the immersion I do is that I now pay attention differently where people are giving talks, or I listen to different podcasts to see why what they do works and why they do the format they do. One of the things I've already started doing but haven't really published a lot is experimenting with new formats. I mean, this is a different format, for example, you've proposed to do, but it's a different format already. And I've tried to start prototyping, let's say, shorter episodes where I talk by myself, trying to convert some concept or thought that I would usually write as a short essay for the blog as a 15 or 25-minute episode. I'm also already thinking toward different theme topics that a lot of guests have talked about. I will group those in sort of like maybe 20-minute capsules or whatever time they require to discuss topics of something like email or clutter or any other topic that you might imagine that we've talked, because there are recurring questions that I ask. And yeah, about guests, I do have a clear idea of that. There is actually a funny thing here, and is that I don't know if it's in my head or if that really happens. I guess it's a little bit of both. It's not until you've interviewed someone that the next person knows that they're a bit more eager to accept the invitation. Slowly, I can get to interview maybe people that I've met in person, or maybe people that I don't know, but that they know some reference from me, from someone else, or that they know my work, or maybe...
Or that they can see that the project is serious and it's not just like this random person.
Exactly, and try to help them out in understanding what the project is about and how it would be good for them to do it, and also how it relates to their career. I've reached to people on Instagram and on Twitter, and I guess like you have to establish some sort of communication to let them know why you do what you do and why you identified them. But one thing that I know for sure is that I would like a format where maybe people don't spend time talking about their career, like their childhood or what they studied or what they're working on now, but they come to the show to explain one really crafted idea that they've been working for the past years, maybe writing a book or a talk that they've given or some specific project that they're doing right now, and all of those around some topic that relates to those lines of research that I mentioned. Ideal people would be like having James Clear summarize his Atomic Habits book in the podcast, or even, I don't know, maybe Jocelyn K. Glide telling us about Hurry Slowly.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let's take the opportunity here to publicly invite anyone who may have a very strong idea to come share it here with us and get in touch with you.
Just to name names, Cal Newport just published a new book called Digital Minimalism. I think those are concepts worth a book, and they're worth reading because they really change the way you interact with, and like with technology in your life, for instance, in that case. And yeah, so I think identifying people, that I think that's the biggest takeaway. Identifying people that can share. Tim Ferriss interviewed Marie Kondo. I don't know if she was that famous at that time, but he interviewed her, and I think that's, a lot of people have read the book. A lot of people have seen the awful Netflix show, but she was able to tell people why she got to where she is.
Awesome. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move on, and now we're going to wrap up this episode by, I'm going to make a series of short questions to you, and then you just respond the first thing that comes up to your mind. All right? How do you deal with digital clutter?
I have systems to name my files and store them, so I try to, every time I have a file, I should have a folder where that file should go, and that folder has a naming convention. I'm doing a pretty good job, but I always have an inbox box where everything I download, everything people send me go, and there's always something ugly there that I don't know where to put.
And how do you deal with that? How do you resolve that?
Create the to-sort folder and then dump everything there, and I have one of those.
So you have a dark folder.
I do have. It's a hole in my computer.
What does your daily commute look like?
It used to be bus. Well, it used to be walk or bike, and then the T, like the subway here in Boston, and then a bus, the Silver Line. But now there's no commute. So I walk maybe 20 steps from my bed to my desk, and I do that when I go back to sleep.
Do you miss having a commute?
I've always said that even before leaving, that I enjoy the commute because it creates this space for yourself in your life. You're forced to it. So you have those 40 minutes to either 40 minutes twice to listen to podcasts or music or catch up with friends or catch up with family, with your girlfriend. And that place is not there when you are always at home, because at home you're either, I don't know, there's this thing at home that you're either working or you're not working. But when you are going to an office, you shower, then you go and you're walking, then you're on the T, then you're on the bus, then you arrive, and then you're talking to coworkers. You're working, and then you go lunch. In the house, it's just it's kind of like a binary thing, and I try to do that as well. So I try to go for walks or running or.
I believe you especially enjoyed when you were here in Boston. You especially enjoyed the walk from your house to the subway, right?
I think one way that you can see it is that instead of leaving your house as fast as you can, having this feeling the whole day that you're rushing everywhere, you could maybe meditate at home before leaving. It's not necessary, right? But if you meditate or you have a shower that's a bit longer than usual, then you have a shower, maybe eat something at home. Then I had the choice to go by bike in 4 minutes or go walking in 15 minutes. So a lot of times I would rather go walking to force myself to have that decompression time and have time for myself instead of feeling that sense of rushing.
Do you have some morning routine now?
Well, for the first 6 months I lived in Spain, I sort of had it, but I haven't really crafted one. I try to wake up early, but I haven't really managed to do the 6 a.m. wake up that I really would like to do, because, and I've done this before in Spain. So the routine, my ideal routine would be that I can wake up at around 5 or 5:30 and then, or maybe 6:30, and then directly sit on the computer and then pour my thoughts in writing. Even if it's just writing things that don't have anything to do with any article, any post, or anything of work, just writing maybe 100 words or 200, get you started, and then you automatically continue writing. And usually those are the times where I draft the best ideas for future episodes or articles or things like that.
Well, I was going to ask you when your best ideas came in to your mind.
That's one moment. I also like doing that because sometimes I would either start with something like writing or doing some editing or some other thing. Sometimes I would straight start with work. So maybe start coding or things like that. And the best feeling that I had is to wake up and start working at 6:30 or 7. And then by 10 or 11, you feel you've done so much that you don't really need to do anything else on the day to feel productive. For best ideas, I'm a really huge believer of
Singing in the shower?
singing in the shower. No. So I think the research refers to this as the default network. So our minds have this continuous activation of different areas depending on the activity you're doing, or depending on what you're talking about. Or if you're playing an instrument, you might activate certain neural networks in your brain. What's funny is that the default network, the one that activates when you are not doing anything, generates more activity in your brain than any other activity that you can do. So I'm a really big believer in like taking long showers, going for a run without any music or any podcasts at times, and do some activities where you might be engaged on a physical activity, but you're not distracted by other media or any other content. And I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to actually be mindful about, let's not look at the phone while I'm in, I don't know, even the elevator or while I'm on the subway and things like that. But you will see that most of the complex logic problems that you have get some random answers while you're not paying attention to other things.
I've known you for a while, and I don't know if the audience knows this, but you don't drink any coffee at all. I don't think you drink tea with caffeine, so only herbal teas, and you barely drink any alcohol. Why do you do that? What other things are you self-restricting to yourself?
One thing you didn't mention, for example, I started not drinking Coke and not putting sugar on tea, for example, since I was in Australia. And I haven't had a Coke since 2012, I think, or something like that. And I don't put any sugar, right? So those are two things that I said to myself. I like to put restrictions to myself for some reason. There wasn't any really thing that was making me do that. But actually, after reading Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, he mentions that, and this was an idea that Cal Newport mentions in his book, and Tim Ferriss also always mentions when he's talking about concentration and performing really difficult tasks, is that even though we don't normally know it, practicing something like concentration or self-restraint in any aspect of your life is going to make you better at self-restraint in any other aspect of your life. Getting better at concentrating in reading an article is going to give you better concentration when you're playing soccer, right? So that's a skill that your brain needs to practice. And the idea in emotional intelligence is that people can practice the delay of gratification. And that requires discipline, but if you practice it in any aspect of your life, it's going to affect your willpower for delaying gratification in other realms. So in some way, I mean, and I guess there will be some research papers or something that might back that up or not. But I believe that if you have some constraints in your life and you're able to fulfill them, like not drinking tea or coffee or caffeine or alcohol or things like this, that's going to allow you afterwards to, I don't know, avoid distractions while you're writing better, or not pay attention to other things while you're doing one task, right? So I think that that's the only reason. And I would say caffeine in general is not about coffee and tea. I like tea, and I usually lately drink non-caffeinated drinks like chamomile or things like that. Seems a bit boring, but I mean, I like it. I used to drink tea, but I think the fact that you understand that you don't need caffeine to get focused or to get awake, it's something you only can realize after you have been without caffeine for a while. And the thing with alcohol, I don't know how, but I gradually stopped drinking. It was like a really gradual process for the last 10 years that I've drink less and less and less. And then there was this time 8 months ago when I saw myself every time I went for dinner out with friends. I would be thinking, do I have one beer? Do I have water? Do I have two beers? Do I have no beer? And that decision making process was super painful. Like I was always thinking like, should I have one? Should I have two? Should I not have any? And one day I said, I'll try just to not drink anything, maybe non-alcoholic beer or maybe water. Ever since then, I said like, so much easier. I just don't take the decision. I don't have to choose if I drink more or not, if I can drive or not, if I can wake up tomorrow to ride in a Saturday morning because I'm hungover. And I don't try to impose this into anyone because I know alcohol can be fun, but I don't know. I'm not especially missing it. It's only about social pressure and the environment that you're in, that if you see other people doing it, you might be not forced into, but pressure into, or you might feel that you're missing out. It's a really complex life decision and it's not trivial. Like, oh yeah, you shouldn't drink alcohol. But yeah, that's my take on that.
What's a healthy relationship with technology? What does it look like?
So yeah, I do this question to everyone.
You do.
My take on this is, first, nobody teaches us how to use technology. Yeah, you're taught how to program. Sometimes Facebook, Instagram, Dropbox, any tools now, they try to walk you through what you can do to get out of the tool when you sign up. But nobody told you that if you check more than 5 times a day Instagram, you can be considered like you're a bit quote unquote an addict, right? Like you're getting this dopamine release that, not that you're gonna be unhealthy, but that you're gonna get over the next days. You're gonna get that need in your brain to open the application. And what really bothers me is that there is no way to craft the application in a way that is healthier for you. And here's where I go with the healthy part. Why can't I post an Instagram photo without seeing how many people followed me yesterday or like my pictures? Why can't I get one part of the feature, like sharing content, but not being exposed to the suggestions that Instagram is telling me to see? Because it's really engaging. I don't buy that you can use Instagram and ignore that. If you open Instagram every day, even for sharing a picture, you're going to get caught. Your brain is going to get caught by images of things that you like because they know it and they're related to what you're sharing. I have this book really present right now because I just read it, Atomic Habits. And I think it was something like 25 milliseconds of exposure to powder of cocaine can make a person crave it and they don't even know that they have seen it. It's this thing that we feel we are not affected by advertisement and how things are crafted for us. But even just, I don't know, you were going to share a picture of work and you're at an event or you are working on an article and then you're exposed to something that worries you or that attracts you. And then your brain completely goes off somewhere. And this is just, it's exaggerating a bit because it's just opening Instagram. But now explode that to opening Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, things that people send you on WhatsApp, or I don't know, you have it to escalate that to, ad brain and all these weird pictures that we get shown as ads, even in the New York Times or New Yorker. And well, I don't really know what they show us ads right now. So yeah, that's, to me, that's the first part. It's like about we are not taught how to use technology in a healthy way or what things might be a threat to our habits.
I find it interesting that I asked you about healthy relationships with technology, but you're kind of responding as if I had asked a relationship with social media. What do you think is this?
We have social media really present as something that is taking on a shape of its own, and that they have so much power in determining what culture means in every country or what news are important or what not. And I can mention Google as well. It doesn't need to be necessarily. And I mention as well the internet, right? I assume you asked me about the internet and the programs that we use. when you said technology. Technology can be your car as well, or anything. But talking about digital technology, I think we could have companies craft technology in a way that they know it's healthier. Might be whatever, I don't know, any other example of any internet application. But if you don't have the addicting factor, or the recurrent notifications, or all the ordeal that goes with subscribing and following and all that stuff, they wouldn't be that successful. And that's a problem. They need that addictive behavior for you to keep at it. Even just a newspaper, even if it's a newspaper about, even Getting Simple, right? That is talking about this, but you can go subscribe to the blog. And what I'm doing is annoying you with an email every once in a while, right? So even it just works like that. Like, you can't really get away. The problem is when you get technology to try to exploit human weaknesses as much as possible. I mean, the best example is viral ads. You have an ad of something that seems viral, the image is optimized for you to click, and then when you go to that, there is another link and another link and another link, and you get lost. Instagram is just a good example because, now everyone's on Instagram, and it's super easy to download it, start using it, and a lot of people end up with the same behavior. A really fast response rates, really high amounts of engagement, and things like this. What I was going to say, that this social media part is true, it took too long, is that what I see as a healthy relationship with technology, because that's an unhealthy relationship with technology, right? That's where you can fall off. A healthy relationship with technology is when you craft the process to only have to use the tools that that work for you. Look for them. That it needs some research, right? You need to try applications, and you need to learn what might be more efficient for you, and then try to create some sort of systems, ways in which you see that they are enabling you to do something, and not determining what you do, but you're using the tools for what you want in a way that improves or enhances your outcome. I always also refer to this as, if you have a Kindle, which you can read books, you're going to read books. There's a really crappy web browser, but I don't know if anyone browses the web there, and you read books. So it's like a device that in some way mimics what you had before. You had a book, but now we have everything compressed in the same thing. Frankie Mero has a talk where he said that when plastic was invented, everything that was wood, steel, or any other material, or glass, became plastic. You have transparent plastic, you have colored plastic, you have any texture, anything could be imitated with plastic. And everything's become plastic. And when software appeared and applications appeared, every technology that we have as an analog object became one more application. So everything went from being a hard object that you can try and test and touch, into a soft program in your pocket, right? In your phone, in your laptop. What this does is that we have more potential productivity in our pockets, but also more potential distraction. And I think that comes back to the healthiness. Healthy relationship with your phone is like using it for where you have to use it, remove applications that are distracting you, removing notifications.
Can you name a recent purchase of $100 or less that you've done recently and that has impacted your life?
It's funny that I've been thinking about this so much and I still don't get good answers. What is it? I had something I bought recently. Well, I will kind of cheat. Something that I really like. I think it was under $100, but it's my Kindle. I just mentioned it, and I've read so much more since I have it. That's for sure. What else can I say? I had something and I forgot about it. Oh yeah, actually talking. This is really referred to everything we've been talking about. I bought $30 absorption panels that look like professional studio with like the pyramidal shape and all that. And that can make any environment that has a bit of echo, improves the quality a lot. So that really, really, really removes a pain in the ass that was finding a good place to record.
What is your take on clothing? Have I pronounced it correctly?
So with clothing, it's the same that what I said before about alcohol. It's about taking less decisions. Again, supposedly backed up by research, like the book Scarcity by Sendil Muhammad or something. I'll link to that. It shows that every day your brain has a certain bandwidth, they call it, and the more decisions you take, the worse decision you will make later. So one thing is about not having too many decisions to take. I don't think clothing is a super, super important thing in life, having many different clothes and stuff. I do think it's important in terms of defining your identity, because like it or not, clothing talks a lot about who you are. And we tend to sadly categorize people by what they're wearing. Many times we get really surprised. And I don't know, I think I try to make a point, and Jose Luis might laugh about that. I try to make a point about that not being true, because my backpack is really almost tearing apart, and I've had it for 5 years, and I don't think that really should be the point of everything.
And we've all been trying to get you a new backpack for years.
Yeah. And my take on clothing is that I have, and you can go to nono.ma/items to see some of those. I have a few jeans. I have 4 of the same black jeans. I finally found the ones I like and are more comfortable for wearing every day. I have 1 pair of shoes that I wear every day. Those are the Nike Free Run. I guess those are another purchase under $100 that I changed my life, because I found them so comfortable, and I don't really think I want any other shoes. And this is not sponsoring Nike. Well, I'm saying Nike, but you guys here say Nike in the US. And I decided that I will only try to own clothing that is either denim jeans or then black, white, gray, or dark blue clothes. And that's, I wear t-shirt every day and wear a sweatshirt, and I think I have my uniform. I really like, this is a quote from Seth Godin. He says, and at work, costumes are called uniforms. We decide what costume we want to wear for our daily lives. It's, for me, statement in some way that I'm wearing the same clothes every day in my house, in my home office, that I will wear if I'm going to give a talk anywhere. And that's just my take.
Do you have any book recommendations for the audience?
Ooh. Well, I try to summarize all this stuff in my website, and I'll link to it, but it's basically nono.ma/books. And I have another that is /2-read with the books I'm planning to read next. And you can see them all there. But some of the ones that I have resonated more with me, for some reason, something that really ticked in my brain that I don't think is that relevant anymore is Getting Things Done by David Allen. Getting Things Done is the proposal of David Allen on the most well-known action methods out there. How to organize your goals in the scope of your whole life, looking from a plane at 10,000 feet, looking from 5,000 feet maybe for your 30 next years, and then looking ahead 5, 1, and then months. And also how to individually set a set of goals. So he understands the life as a set of projects, and each of them has a to-do list of things that you have to do next. And I'm simplifying a lot. He is a consultant on productivity. He would go to offices and change the whole way how they are archive files and how they organize what needs to be done in a project and things like that. And yeah, it was kind of my introduction to the whole world of productivity and things like that. But other books that really, really I would recommend reading, because I'm not sure if I would recommend you to read Getting Things Done book right now. And one interesting thing is that after reading Getting Things Done, it resonated so much that I created a brand called Getting Architecture Done. And that then evolved to Getting Simple. And that's actually where it all comes from. It was about bringing the Getting Things Done method into architecture, and then Getting Simple is about sort of bringing it into your daily life and things like that. And then the books I wanted to mention are Deep Work by Cal Newport, how to be productive and actually focus on making creative projects and making projects happen. I would recommend some books from Seth Godin. Thrives is really good. Well, his podcast is really good, Akimbo, kind of synthesizing his career in a podcast and his teachings. And also I liked All Marketers Are Liars, Emotional Intelligence, I mentioned already. And some that Jose Luis really likes. The Information by James Clegg and The Inevitable by Kevin Kelly. And yeah, I'll probably link to more.
Well, before we finish the interview, I mean, I'm not even sure if this question applies anymore, but where can people find you online?
Well, the easiest way actually is if you go to nono.ma, and there are a lot of little links with icons to all the social media accounts that I have. I have Drivel, GitHub, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. At Twitter, you can find me at NonoESP. And also this podcast is under at getting_simple, even though on Instagram it's just at getting simple. But really, you can just go to gettingsimple.com and nono.ma and find everything.
And I think this is my favorite question in your podcasts. Do you have any question for me?
Yes. So how long have you been thinking about doing this to me?
I like how you say, doing this to me, in like a dramatic way. How has it felt to be interviewed in the Getting Simple podcast?
It felt weird in terms of being, again, a bit nervous for being the person interviewed. It also felt like I would like to write more about these things. That's what I'm doing, right? But what I think about the podcast, really, and I think everyone who's here, the afterthought is at some other time in my life, I probably wouldn't have said that. I probably would have said this other thing instead of told you more about this new project I'm doing. I was a bit concerned of, would I miss something? What's the best answer for each of those questions? And again, I think that's something I have really present in my life, that life is more and more about quantity, right? Like getting the quality good enough, right? Good enough is good enough. And then doing quantity. So I don't think that this might be the only time that I'm put on this spot and asked about my life. I think what would be really nice is that the interviews I do and the writings I do and the readings I do actually change the way I do certain things. And I can say that I've improved and got better at the way I do things in my life.
I think that's a wonderful way of wrapping this up. Thank you very much, Nono.
Thank you so much. I would like to say, now that we're here, the only reason why this podcast exists is because you, the listener, are listening to us. And I would really encourage you to reach out to me. Write to me on Twitter or even at my email. So I'm mail@nono.ma. Feel free to tell me what you think about this. Tell me if there's something that you would like to see on the podcast or something that you're really enjoying. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.